So what's the reason for making this video a few days before the release? This teaser trailer got me excited, and I've never been able to say that about most Rolex teasers. This one in particular had such a diverse palette of colors, of different materials and finishes, so much variety, that I felt I had to sit down and come up with some believable renders of how we're going to see this product line change. It's such a wide spread, and by the looks of things, it's celebrating 2 anniversaries, revitalizing another collection, while at the same time adding alternative materials and colorways. And from that alone, it leaves a lot to interpretation. And historically, we know that the predictions are always more fun than the actual releases. So let's give it one final bash. The official releases are a few days away, and this teaser trailer we've been given shows a lot more than I think we've ever seen. Some of the computer-generated imagery is so obvious, it's very easy to determine what watch we're going to see from each category. From it, I've made a short list of 5 watches that we can expect to see, and within each one of these categories, I can play around with designs and renders. Let's start with the obvious. This year we are celebrating 2 anniversaries. The anniversary of the Daytona, its 60th, the anniversary of the Explorer, its 70th. Notice we are not seeing a Submariner anniversary. The Submariner anniversary cycle has changed. 2003 we saw the Kermit, the green bezel. 2010 we saw the Hulk. 2020 we saw the whole line changed and revitalized. So with the anniversary sub off the table, the anniversary Explorer, released the same year as the sub, 1953, could be an interesting proposition. And here's my thinking of what we might see. We might see it sized up to 39mm to follow suit with the 36, but more likely I expect we will see the 36mm with a different dial color. From the footage, it's easy to notice that it is an Explorer dial, but what they've been able to hide pretty well is how the lighting plays on the dial. Whether the light is playing off the crystal and the glass dial, or whether this dial is in fact going to be white. And I think for an anniversary watch you wanted to make a statement. And what's an obvious next step from a black dial Explorer? We've seen it in the Explorer 2 category, why can't the Explorer 1 get the same treatment? So more likely than anything else, I have a strong belief that we're going to see a white dial Explorer, 36mm, but this is where it might get even more interesting, with a left-hand drive configuration. I know. From one of the quick panning shots we see, there's a shadow in the background. And if you notice the crown position, and if my trigonometry is right, the crown looks like it's on the left-hand side. So my thinking is a white dial Explorer 36mm with a left-hand drive configuration. And if that doesn't work, other options could be a slate grey dial, a blue dial, with the standard right-hand drive configuration. I've got to say, if the Explorer arrives in a white dial, it's pretty much the dream Explorer for someone like me. That blend of classic elegance that Rolex and their older pieces were always known for, plus the ability of an everyday going sports watch. As a pairing, as a combination, it works so nicely, and I think it would win many people over. Now for something quite different in the field of metallurgy and materials, a titanium Yacht-master. This is almost 100% confirmed once again, thanks to the images. Rolex debuting a prototype of their RLX Titanium on the wrist of Ben Ainslie, the yachtsman, a few years ago. The watch had obviously seen use and had been tested in the field. And on top of that, at the end of last year, Rolex giving us the Deep Sea Challenge. Their first fully titanium watch. This allowed them to experiment with how they're going to use the material on a full bracelet watch. We can easily assume that this watch is going to be fully brushed in finish, and it's great to see that there's chamfers on the edges of this new professional case. The question is whether or not this watch is going to use the slab side case of the Submariner or stick to its original Yacht-master case with curves. Somehow I don't believe that they're going to make a titanium case with rounded forms. It's far harder to machine that way. And maybe what they'll do instead is focus on giving us a hybrid of both. Some rounded forms at the underside of the lugs, maybe where the crown guards are, but leave the sides of the case flat. The next question to ask is whether or not this is going to be a date or a no date variation, and something in my gut says it's going to be a no date, following in the footsteps of the Ainslie model but now with an oyster bracelet. But that's neither here nor there. Just expect to see a 42mm Yacht-master with a full titanium case and bracelet, black ceramic bezel, and that's about as much as we know at the moment. Maybe some red accents included on the dial, maybe some light blue. It'll be a stunning watch, not only putting this collection in the limelight but also producing a more toolish, professional-oriented diver that's slim and appropriate for everyday wear. And of course, extremely light in weight. Can't forget that. The next 3 watches are more open to interpretation and speculation, but what we've seen from one image is what appears to be a black and yellow gold GMT. I spent some time thinking about it, and the best I could come up with Almost a reinterpretation of the 116718, I believe that was the reference. If you notice the bezel insert, it appears black between 8 and 10. Now historically it should be a light color because that signifies daylight. For the Batman it's blue, for the Pepsi it's blue, and for the Sprite GMT it's green. So I'm assuming this is a full black bezel insert on a black dial with yellow gold accents. And from there we can have a bit more fun by not only giving it an oyster bracelet, but to be even more creative, why not a full yellow gold Jubilee bracelet? This in a way could call back to one of the most beautiful 1675s ever created. Black dial, black bezel, yellow gold case with a yellow gold Jubilee. More than anything though, this colorway will help differentiate the GMT from the rest of the pack. So ideally I'd love to see this watch on a Jubilee, but more likely I think a solid yellow gold oyster bracelet instead. That configuration would make such a beautiful piece. Now to the next watch that's celebrating its anniversary, the Daytona. From one of the final images we see the camera tracking around the dial. It's a light blue dial, it's very obviously a Daytona dial because of the hash marks. So in a similar way by how the 50th anniversary Daytona was celebrated with an ice blue dial and brown accents, I would love to see this Daytona celebrated with black accents this time round. Solid subdials, a black ceramic bezel in full platinum. Rolex generally tries to be quite stealthy with the use of platinum, and I think on a watch like this, it's just subtle enough to hold your attention with these colors without being overdone. At least that's my belief. It's going to be something very simple. So in these renders you can see that the subdials I played with I've either hollowed out or kept pretty basic and solid. But one of, if not the biggest standout that I think everyone's going to be questioning is the Cellini collection. Very obvious that we're going to see the Cellini revitalized by what looks to be stone dials. Most of us know that historically the Cellini collection has sort of fallen off the map. They are beautiful watches, they are brilliant, but Rolex today isn't known for making dress watches. This could be their return by looking back at what they did in the 70s and the 80s with their stone dials, now looking at something like orange malachite or green malachite, spicing up this collection. We also know that collectors love stone dials on watches, so this could be the perfect formula. Rolex bringing back this simple but exciting infusion of semi-precious stones with precious metals like yellow gold, rose gold. So I expect we're going to see some variants: orange, green, blue, black, maybe even white. This could be very similar to how the Oyster Perpetual line was revamped a few years ago. And when I sit back and think about it, it's a genius move from their part. Taking a collection of watches that have never garnered a lot of attention, but injecting them with an element that pulls a lot of attention, adding some vibrance and color to a pretty standard dress watch. Safe to say I have no idea what they're going to look like if they change the dial configurations completely, if they add Roman numerals or standard stick batons. I don't believe they're going to use any lume, they're going to stick to alpha hands. So I would say expect classic oyster case elegance, but now with bright excitement of tiger's eye, aventurine, malachite. All in all, I would say this is a very exciting series of releases that we're going to see this year because it's so diverse and open-ended, because a handful of pieces that we love are going to be looked at, as well as quite a majority of pieces that we neglect for the most part, like the Yacht-master and the Cellini, are being put in the limelight. I said from the very beginning of this year that I was looking forward to these releases because, judging by their track record last year and how strange and out of left field those watches were, this series, we really didn't have much of an idea of what they were going to give us besides anniversary watches. But we can see very clearly here that they are taking a more creative step. In typical Rolex fashion, new color variations, new case materials chosen, celebrating a few anniversaries at the same time while putting an old collection back on the map. With all that said, we have a few hours to wait. So let's see if any of these designs are realized. I have my doubts.